Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas. And this is not a study. This is going to be a testimony. So usually we'd start out with a study, but this time I'm going to actually give a short testimony and catch up a few people that might not have heard it before. And forgive the picture. It's an old picture, but I don't have a new one with my gray hair and old dude look, so I just have this one from when I was about 45 or so. But I want to share kind of what I've gone through. It all begins way back in 1968, and that's back during the draft for the Vietnam War, and I was drafted for Vietnam, and so instead of going in the Army, I ran down to my Air Force recruiter and signed up for the Air Force to avoid being drafted into the Army. And the recruiter said, "Oh yeah, you won't go to Vietnam if you go into the Air Force." I said, "Okay." I signed up. Sure enough, my orders were for Vietnam. So anyway, I got shipped over to Vietnam after a little short half-year tour in Washington, D.C. Then I got shipped over to Saigon. I arrived during a rocket attack. So my first night was spent in a bunker, and I was in the bunker in my underwear with my flak vest and helmet on with an M16, and completely pitch black. You know, we couldn't see, and I had a clip of ammo in my M16, and I had a couple clips in my flak vest, and I was just in this bunker waiting to I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like, what is going on? How did I end up here? So that's how I spent my first night in the bunker during a rocket attack, and everybody that has been over there will tell you that all you do is count your days, like, when do I get to go home? When do I get to go home? And that comes 1 year later. So 1 year later, I received my orders to return back to the States. But the day before I went back, my sergeant that was over my group, he was shot down and killed 1 day before he was supposed to go home. So he was the only casualty in my group, but he was my sergeant, and he was killed 1 day before going home. And he was working as a machine gunner on a Huey, so that's something you volunteer for. And he said, "Ballard, if you ever want to volunteer to be a gunner on the Huey, let me know and I'll get you in." I never volunteered to be a gunner on a Huey. Never. I never did. He did, and it was a volunteer job because it was a suicide mission. That's who they aim at, is the machine gunner on the Huey when they try to shoot it down. And he died 1 day before he was supposed to go home. Anyway, a year later, I did get released, and I got orders to Fort Worth, Texas, to Carswell Air Force Base. And when I went to Carswell Air Force Base, two things happened. I met my wife-to-be in Fort Worth, and at a Baptist church, Trinity Baptist Church in River Oaks. And I also encountered a group called the Navigators, a Christian organization on base at Carswell Air Force Base. And so that was the beginning of my journey to really start learning about discipleship and about what it means to be a follower of Christ. Before that, I did not know. I didn't have a clue. I didn't know how to read a Bible. I didn't know how the Bible was put together. I knew nothing. So the Navigators helped me to get, they gave me navigation through the scriptures, and I met my wife at Trinity Baptist Church, and I was baptized at Trinity Baptist Church in 1973. I'm an old dude. 1973 I was baptized, and by John Hatch, the pastor there, and I still keep in touch with John. We were still very good friends, and great pastor. He was just finishing up his doctorate at Southwestern Seminary at the time. Very young pastor at the time, but when you're a single adult, they work you to death. I was in charge of children's church. I was a Germain. I was a Germain kind of guy. I was a Germain. I was on the staff. I ran children's church. I ran the bus ministry and Saturday morning visitation, and also did some hospital visits. So it's like, okay, we're going to put you to work, Ballard. But it was a great time, and it was my pastor that talked me into going to Dallas Baptist University. At that time, it was called Dallas Baptist College, to get my BA, and I went and got my bachelor's at Dallas Baptist in religion. And then after Dallas Baptist, I went to Michigan. I'm from Michigan originally. I went back to Michigan. For some reason, you think you have to go back to where you were born. I don't know why, but I went back to Michigan, and I did social work. I ran a shelter home for neglect and abused children. And I did that for 3 years. And that was my ministry and my job combined. And while I was there, the Lord spoke to me and said, it's time to get your master's. It's time to go to seminary. So I applied for a scholarship at Eden Theological Seminary in St. Louis, and I got a full scholarship. Got a full scholarship at Eden Theological Seminary in St. Louis, and I was going to study there. And so I quit my job, packed up the moving van. We drove to St. Louis, and they accidentally gave our housing away. And so I got to St. Louis with a scholarship in hand and no place to live. So, long story short, we kept everything packed up in the moving van. We drove down to Fort Worth. I said, well, we'll go back to Fort Worth. My wife is from Fort Worth, so we went back to Fort Worth. And I went to work for a while. And then one evening after work, I went to the religion department at Texas Christian University. And I just walked into the head of the religion department, and I just said, I want to talk to you about a master's degree. So he said, yeah, fine. So I just sat down. It was Dr. Lawrence, Ken Lawrence. And I sat down and I talked to him, and he said, you know what? If you did that well at Dallas Baptist, I'll give you a scholarship to go to TCU. So get your transcript to me, and let me take a look at it. So I did that, and TCU gave me a full scholarship for my master's work at the religion department at TCU, but I would be taking all of my seminar classes at Bright Divinity School, because that was really where all of the teaching took place, even though it was through the Adrian College of Arts and Sciences. And so I worked on my master's for a good 4 years. It's supposed to be 2 or 3 years. I made sure I spent a full 4 years of my master's. Real slow. And so I graduated, and we decided to stay in Texas. But rather than going on and getting my PhD, I kind of felt like I had an obligation to go to work. My wife had been working while I had been going to school during my bachelor's and my master's, and I said, you know what? She doesn't need to go through another 4 years of working while I go to school. It's time for me to go to work. So I went to work and got into management for Redmond Homes, and I raised my family. We had a son, a little youngster at that time, and so I worked, and my ministry was something outside the church, but I did continue in ministry, but it was always a teaching ministry that was always kind of outside the church, like it is today. My ministry at 121 is a YouTube ministry. Anyway, we got settled into living in Weatherford. We lived out at Lake Weatherford for years, and eventually we ended up parting our ways, my wife and I, and I ended up landing in Burleson, Texas, while I was working at Redmond, because they were located in Burleson. And at that time, I was also racing bicycles in a master's division and doing pretty well. I was state ranked. I was number 3 in the state. So doing pretty good in racing bicycles, and I was writing, literary writing, and getting published quite a bit. So I had a lot going on, but the state championship was coming up, and I was training for the state championship in 2008. And in April 2008, I had a massive stroke, and it took all of my right hemisphere brain. Therefore, I have no movement. My left leg, my left arm are paralyzed, and they are permanently paralyzed because I have no right hemisphere brain. All of my right hemisphere brain is dead. That forced me into a whole new world. No more racing bicycles, no more doing photography as a hobby, no more hiking in the national parks. It changed my life completely, and what it's told me is that my new life was going to be being a student, and that's it. So in a way, the Lord used this paralysis to turn me back toward Christian studies, and I poured myself into Christian studies diligently, and eventually, after the stroke, I moved up to the North Texas area, up here at Hazlitt and Keller area, because my son lives there, and he said, "You got to be close to me, Dad, since you've got this stroke." So I moved in to a house up here in the Hazlitt area, close to my son, within a mile of my son. And while here, I got into a Bible study group, a life group led by Neil Essen, and Neil Essen invited me to 121 Community Church, and then I transferred my membership from Trinity Baptist Church to 121 Community Church, and I have been here for 5 or 6 years now, and I have had church, fellowship, and worship, life group, fellowship, and study, and I have a YouTube channel ministry. Even paralyzed, I can have a teaching ministry, and that has been my life over these last 5 or 6 years of being a member at 121. So it's been a struggle because about a year and a half ago, I got word that I've got cancer. So I go, okay, I'm paralyzed, and now I've got cancer, and they gave me 2 weeks to live, and they said, we got some experimental treatment we're going to try, but it probably won't work. And they told, my son was with me, and they said, your dad will probably live another 2 weeks. If this experimental drug can work, then he could live 10 years. So that was a pretty wide open prognosis, 2 weeks to 10 years. And as you know, you've seen me at church, it's the 10-year program that I'm on. The Lord's got me on the 10-year program. I did not die in 2 weeks. The Lord has kept that cancer in check. So basically I live with paralysis, cancer, and the pandemic. And that's 3 pretty big mountains. But with those 3 mountains, I have a sufficient grace through Jesus Christ, my Lord and my Savior. And so I'm thankful every day. I always have the attitude, I wake up, I'm thankful that I woke up. I'm thankful that I woke up. But I'm thankful for church, for life group, and for ministry, and for the friends that I've gathered at 121. So that's my very brief testimony, but I miss everyone. I always go to the 5. We're like a family at the 5. Everyone knows everyone, and we are a genuine family at the 5. So I love you, my friends. Can't wait for the vaccine to be created so we can get back to church. Love you, my friends.